Okay.
Hi, welcome to Angela's Caches, doing another deep dive with Kathy Morgan and a third person who submitted some research to me a couple of weeks ago and was intended to join us actually on audio, but has some health issues, which is so common with many survivors, particularly of no consent medical experiments whilst in the care system or in MKUltra programs. So we're going to just start the conversation now. I'm going to just give a brief outline of the notes she gave me, which were intended to be built upon. And then Kathy's going to bring her leg of the jigsaw, her portion of the jigsaw to bear. And then hopefully our researcher, who's already a published author, her health will recover and we'll be able to tie the whole thing together. So I'll just start with some just basically outlining notes, building on previous research Kathy and I have put forward, and also that this person featured in her last book. So these are just notes, and some of it won't mean a lot to people, but for those researching and presenting on no consent medical experiments and MKUltra in the UK, these names will be familiar. Sorry about the poor lighting. We're trying to set up a two room. It'll work. It'll be fine. So this lady referred to Dr. Milner, who was well known at Aston Hall Hospital, and whose granddaughter got in touch with this particular researcher, I think after her first book. We're talking about the deputy medical supervisor at Rampton Hospital, which is somewhere they talked about sending Melanie Shaw and possibly Nick. Survivors that have been silenced at all costs can end up in places like that. And for evidence of that, there's a survivor of Jimmy Savile and of a paedophile ring run by her Tory MP father. And because she was uncooperative, I think at the age of very, very young age, she started to be sexually abused that she remembered from about the age of 7, but she was not compliant enough, and her father arranged for her to be locked away. She was locked away in Broadmoor and other institutions for 28 years. That is how long they put this little girl away, ostensibly as a mental health patient, because she could blow the whistle on the whole paedophile ring, which was operating through her MP father and his circle of friends. So that does happen. So then we talk about Bruce Fogel, who co-authored books, married to Julia Foster, a British actress, and friends with Dr. Milner in the 1970s. We looked at Jimmy Savile and his involvement with Saxondale Hospital, which is a sister hospital to Aston Hall, which has already been proven to have conducted illegal experiments and torture on children. There's the question why 5-year-olds were held in Rampton. There were 2 villas of children of Aston Hall annexed to the Rampton Hospital. We're talking about Bruce, a son and a daughter, and a connection to the BBC. We're talking about a Crime Watch announcer, Ben Adventures. We're talking about the BBC, very, very involved. There's many more reasons as to why the BBC won't give coverage to things like Melanie Shaw, Finchley Road, and so on. The connections with the BBC are so profound, it's stunning. So we've got Milner, Broadmoor, and Rampton, born in Wakefield. Then there's talk of a lost television show, which was taken over by Rolf Harris. And just to specify, with regard to Bruce Fogel, there's no evidence of, we don't have any evidence of corruption or complicitness. Now, Bruce was born in Canada. Ewan Cameron was on the same team as Milner, Ewan Cameron of infamy, psychic driving and torture, basically. People have been compensated for that. The registrar, at the time that Ewan Cameron and Milner were on the same team, the registrar was William Sargent, very, very well known in MKUltra. So then we have the talk of vets, and we've seen this crossover before, starting right from Pavlov, with veterinary implications and involvements, and anthropologists being switched over to MKUltra research. It's very bizarre. So then we go talking about the Home Office in the 1990s, which gave a research grant into different departments of the justice system. Mainly, their huge focus was research into juvenile delinquency. Then we talk about R.V.B. Clark, psychiatrist attached to the Home Office. Then we talk about the German Dr. Essink, I don't know how to pronounce that name, I'm sure Kathy will. They would recruit subjects for research from children's homes. And recruit is the wrong word, really. They were assisted by K.O. Milner and Michael Kraft. They were allowed to do 10 different studies into psychiatric personalities. So you can see, in a way, they created these diagnoses which are now being used to traffic children and steal children from parents. I'm not completely against psychology, but particularly psychiatry, I would suggest, has been manipulated, and its problem, reaction, solution will compile, we'll do some research, we'll come up with, okay, we need to take your children because you've got borderline personality disorder and cluster A and B, blah, blah. Or you've got, the most ridiculous, it's being used over and over again, risk of future emotional harm to the children, particularly they like to take babies, and they have any array of psychiatric disorders to pin on a mother or a father and use it as grounds to have a judge sign away the children. So this is quite stunning. I think at a later stage I can tell you what the grant was. So Kraft was also attached to Baldstones Hospital, and Kraft's son married Milner's daughter. Then there's, I think it was a book, Alison Taylor in 1989, Lost in Care Report. This was a case in Wales. The young girl's report of abuse was sent to Derbyshire. The Welsh homes and transferred Kraft to Balderstone with his favourite little boy. Then we talk about more harvesting of subjects for these research through the youth clubs, the scouts, etc. And amongst other things, these children would be subjected to electroshock treatment. So we have reference to Sargent's zombie wards, particularly or including King's College Hospital, and Milner being referred to as the UK Angel of Death, Dr. Joseph Mengele, the UK version of Mengele. A similar, a freak, what do you call that word? Happens in other, Mengele was very much like this. Quite a lot of these mad scientist types would insist that the child subjects were stripped and bathed before experiments, regardless of what the experiments were. David Owen worked with William Sargent. Pamela Mason, MP, Head of Social Services and Children's Services, a connection with Richmond Hill School. Then this person got in touch with me, amongst other reasons, because I talked about tattoos and piercings and distinctive markings reported by victims of their abusers. And this particular researcher is a survivor herself, and reports that when she came out of care, she had a blood red, what looked like a birthmark on her leg, but which absolutely hadn't been there before she went in. So she got in touch with me to say, you know, it never occurred to me it could have been a tattoo or branding ritual or any number of explanations, but she was very, very clear that there was no birthmark when she was put into care. And when she came out, traumatized many years later, there was a vast... So that came up. Yeah, writing indistinguishable. Johnny Gosh. Yeah, there are some similarities in the tattoos and markings being described now by multiple victims or survivors in different locations, different generations. This is starting to come forward. She talks about an upside down cross and the rocker of a rocking horse. Now, it would be, she talks about Johnny Gosh as well, referring to the same thing. And it would be good to have survivors and victims that are remembering or do remember to actually start drawing these tattoos and markings, whereas she may be simply explaining it seemed like the rocker off a rocking horse, but in symbolism that could be important. There's also talk of the need for a book to be written on grooming of victims as adults, which is happening a lot, not just for sexual assault, but for recruiting them to come over to the dark side. So there was a grant of £639,000 sterling. This was back a few decades ago, so it was actually a vast grant. And a very bizarre thing which indicates that the CIA were working hand in hand with British Black Ops was that this research, the report from the Home Office, which commissioned this research and gave this vast grant, shared the results with the Washington DC justice system. Why on earth would our Home Office share Black Ops experiments results with Washington? This is all evidenced. There was a book by Milner called Comparative Criminology, Volume 1. I think it featured, or somebody else brought up, was Herman Mannheim. Then we talk about Milner and Esnick researching sodium amytal, which is referred to as one of the original truth serums. And then there was reference made to the world's most scary drug, based on a little documentary by Vice on YouTube. And that drug was used on the children of Aston Hall. And then in 1953, this is a mystery that's still trying to be solved by citizen journalists and authors because it's not been properly looked at. But in 1953, 3 young boys escaped from Aston, or actually they might have been young men, Aston Hall Hospital. But they walked into the river and involuntarily drowned. And it's very much suspected that that was a mind control experiment to see the level of obedience to hypnosis or remote instructions. And you can see that was in 1953. And you can see with mass shootings with apparently lone gunmen, they often look like MKUltra victims, completely glazed eyes, no memory of what they did, or they just look MK'd out. And for those that are genuine incidents, these experiments were being done, we suspect, in 1953, connected to Aston Hall and other places. Barry White, aged 24, escaped from Aston Hall, ran into the River Trent and was found dead. There was an immediate inquest. There was no death certificate signed. He was buried 30 miles away, and no next of kin were informed. Now, this case is resurfacing because it was a separate case where somebody escapes, runs into the river and drowns. there's a chance it was a suicide, but based on the evidence, it's probably more likely it was connected to hypnosis and MKUltra experiments. Then we're talking about Bruce Fogel again, who is a vet and has an animal crematorium. We're talking about research and the Bristol Training School, and that was where we were going to pick things up and go deeper. And as I've explained, this lady's health is not good, but Kathy has some links in common and that she can also explore. So I'm sitting in a dark space so she can do screen share. So go ahead and share screen, Kathy. This is Kathy Morgan, referred to as one of the foremost researchers on UK MKUltra, and a survivor like myself. We had a lot in common with our childhood programming. You can find a playlist on Kathy Morgan's YouTube channel, or you can find a lot of work we've done together on my YouTube channel, Angela Power Disney, or Angie Power Disney.